My search took me to the farthest reaches of the world. I traveled on ships across the seas. I've seen so many wonders of the world and almost just as many terrors. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Talk About Strange. I'm really excited to share this story with you guys. It's going to be really cool. I read this through at the beginning. It's a little bit embarrassing for me, but that's okay. We're going to get through it. It's phenomenal, and it also is a message to Claire and Eva. So I can't wait to share this and share this with them. So hopefully they'll watch this video sometime soon, and maybe we'll hear something back. So I'm going to just go ahead and jump right into it. First, I want to say, I apologize. I haven't been posting too much lately. I'm trying to get this podcast show together, and it's just been an astronomical amount of work and issues. Just anything that could go wrong has went wrong. So I've been really battling through this. It's been extremely exhausting, but I think the end goal is going to be worth it, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun with it. I've been playing around with that hard-boiled topics. You guys can go check out the channel for that. I don't have anything on it other than my little opening thing that I did. But there's going to be content going on there. So if you just want to pre-subscribe to that channel, jump on over there. I got the link in my about section. Maybe I'll put it on under this post as well. So anyway, that's about it for now. I'm just going to go ahead and get right to this. And you guys stick around because this is going to be, you're going to really be blown away by this. It's a lot of fun. All right. I got to get used to using the microphone here. Now it's just a little bit different for me. I don't know if I'm going to use this all the time or if I'm going to use this for podcasts and go back to the other. It's just a lot of setup and breakdown. Okay. Hello, Steve. This is titled The Immortal and a Bigfoot, plus a message to Claire and Eva. I hope all is well. I am writing you today because I find you and some of the stories you share to be unique and interesting. I think you should know that I follow a lot of strange and unusual channels, but none quite like yours, if I'm being honest. Please allow me to explain and understand that I mean no disrespect. As for you, I appreciate your delivery on these very unusual stories. I believe some of them to be rubbish, and I think you might agree. However, you deliver them with equal respect and astute interest. You also appear to me as a very kind, generous, and honorable man. You got great taste. I'm just kidding. These seem to be rare qualities these days as we, again, live in such tumultuous times. I would go as far as to say that you have a very old soul, as they say. I wonder, though, how many of your viewers see you as I do. Aside from those observations I mentioned, I see in your eyes the road of your life has not always been smooth, and yet you still smile bravely for us. I'm just going to stop right there and say, that is very true, and I think it's probably true with a lot of people. We try not to wear those tough times on our shoulders or show them. We want to be happy and inspirational and have fun. So that's how I try to be anyway. I see the weariness in your eyes underneath your boyish enthusiasm. That's nice. I like that. Boyish enthusiasm. Please understand, as I said, I mean no disrespect. In fact, just the opposite. I believe you to be a brave and strong as well, as you carry your heart on your sleeve, less your burdens. You remind me of someone I once knew a very long time ago. He too was brave, strong, and ambitious like you. His success was at the cost of his mind and body. It was a price he paid with grace. However, his years on this earth were far too short for me. I hope this world spares you the time you rightfully deserve. Yeah, I do too. But I digressed. Amongst the stories you have shared, I think that Jane might just be the salt of the earth. While Wendy is brave and strong as an oak, I find Claire and Eva as well to be extremely interesting, and I'll explain to you why. But first, wouldn't you like to know a bit about me? Yes, we would. My name is Raven. I know that might sound a bit cliche, but I guarantee you that I've claimed that name longer than anyone you've ever known. Well, that is, unless you are a lot older than you look. I really don't know the name I was given at birth, or if I was even given one for that matter. Which leads me to how my story began. I woke up one morning to the sound of a dog barking very loud and excessively. My head was throbbing. With each bark he let out echoed like that of a hammer inside my skull, and my ears rang intensely. I struggled to open my eyes, but the sun was so bright it added to my pain in my head. Squinting, I used my hand to try and block out the sun enough to look towards the barking dog. I found him bouncing and leaping in the shadow of a tree he was barking at. With every bit of effort I could conjure, I crawled into the shade to assist in opening my eyes. I was startled as the large angry dog ran at me, thinking he was about to attack. Instead, he proceeded to lick my face and arm and hands. As annoying as it was much better than the alternative. That was until he let out another explosive bark straight into my ear as he ran back to his station and proceeded to bark. Still squinting, I looked up into the tree, curious what was upsetting him. Looking down at me and the dog was a big black raven. Through the ringing of my ears and the barking, I heard him caw as he cocked his head side to side. As I was becoming more aware and my head and ears started to settle a bit, I was suddenly startled by a small voice behind me. I turned to look, and there stood a young girl not more than 5 or 6 years old, with long, dirty blonde hair and what looked like a soft canvas parka draped over her with a string tying it around her waist. She was holding a wooden bucket of water. I remember the glistening water dripping from the bottom of the bucket as she asked me if I was thirsty. I tried to say yes, but the words didn't leave my mouth. So I nodded my head, and she handed me a small bowl of water from the bucket. In that moment, I think it might have been the best thing I'd ever tasted. Funny thing is, I vaguely remember the water being warm and sort of dirty looking in the bowl, but my thirst outweighed my judgment. The little girl asked me if I was okay, but I couldn't answer, as I really didn't know. In fact, I didn't seem to know much of anything other than my head hurt so bad it clouded my thoughts. Yeah, she called to the dog to be quiet, and to my relief, he respected her stern little command. Then she reached into the bucket and pulled out a rather dirty looking rag and wrung it out into the same bucket the bowl was in. She said, "Here, put this back on your head." The rag also appeared to have blood stains on it, so I hesitated at the thought of the water or whether it was my blood. She said, "Here, I'll do it," and then took the rag back and wrapped it up over the left side of my forehead. It stung a bit, so I placed my hand on my head to try and figure out why it hurt. I felt a lump on the side of my head above my temple that ran all the way past my ear. It hurt so much to touch, so I cringed and she pulled my hand away. "Don't touch it," she demanded in her sweet little voice. Do you know how it is when you have a cut or a bump or a bruise you can't seem to leave alone? Well, this was nothing like that. It hurt in a way that I really didn't care to touch it again anyway. She handed me another bowl from the bucket. Even knowing now what was in the dirty water, I drank it down. Then she asked me my name. I stopped and thought about it, looking to her for something or someone familiar, but she wasn't. So I looked all around, but nothing was familiar to me, and for the life of me, I couldn't recall my own name. I cleared the dust and whatever else was blocking my voice enough to say, "I don't know." She just looked at me funny and asked, "Why don't you know your own name?" I replied, "I don't know." Then she asked where I came from, but I didn't know that either. I asked her if she knew how I got there, and she said no, just that she was playing and followed her dog out here, then saw her dog chase that black bird away from me. I looked up at the bird and said, "It's a raven." She asked if that was my name, and I said no, then pointed up. I explained that black bird there is a raven. She agreed and said, "That's okay. I will just call you Raven until you remember your name." That was 540 some odd years ago, and I still don't remember my name or anything prior to that day. Wow. Interesting, right? She asked me if I could stand up. I wasn't sure of that either, but I gave it a shot. The first couple of tries, I got dizzy and sat back down. So she set the bucket down and ran off briefly, returning with a rather large stick that I could steady myself with. I tried again, and despite her large dog attempting to gather my attention by brushing up against my leg, I managed to stand up. I asked her for her name. She replied, Agnes. So I said, that's a pretty name. And she said, I know. People tell me that all the time. I couldn't quite laugh, but I did smile. I asked her why she was helping me, and she replied, when I fall down and get hurt, someone always helps me up. Steve, there has never been more profound words ever spoken to me. If all the people of this world could take a page from that little girl's book, what a wondrous world it would be. She led me into a small village where she lived. There were several people out on the street, most of them staring at me and little Agnes. I wasn't sure why. I thought maybe because of my injury. About halfway through the village, a man spotted us and ran over. Concerned about her, he asked where she had been and who I was. She replied, this is my friend. I found her by the stream and was helping her. Her father asked her if her friend had a name while looking straight at me. I was about to tell him that I didn't know when Agnes blurted out, her name is Raven. He smiled at her, then sent her home, and she said, come on, Raven, follow me. I looked at her father, expecting him to send me away, but he just shook his head and said, you'd better go with her. I'll be along soon. She called out again, demanding in her little voice, my mom will fix your head, and that she did. She also fed me, washed and mended my ragged clothes. Her name was Caroline. She was young, beautiful, and just as kind as her little girl. Her father's name was Liam. He was also kind and generous. They let me stay with them until I got better. Over time, Liam and some of the other villagers helped me build a place of my own. The days turned into weeks, then months, then years. This had become my home, and everything I knew at that time came from this village and these people and that little girl. About 3 years had passed before Liam and several of the other men and older boys in the village were recruited to go fight a battle far away. If my memory serves me right, it had something to do with the War of the Roses. Though there had been several skirmishes between there and England, several men never came home, including Liam. The ones that did return were never the same. Some of the boys returned as mostly broken men. However, a few fortunate ones overcame their battle scars and went on to become great husbands and fathers. I had become very close friends with most everyone in this village, especially Caroline and little Agnes. My roots grew deeper and deeper into the soils of this community. Still, I wondered where it was that I had come from and where and whom I was before. Over time, I learned things myself through instances and happenstance. For instance, I was and still am very good with my hands. I knew how to fix and build things like tools and even some weaponry. I didn't know why, but I could wield a sword rather well and was pretty strong compared to the other women in the village. Maybe I was some kind of a warrior, though judging from the injury on the side of my head, I might not have been a very good one. That's funny for me. The years passed seemingly and fast forward. I watched little Agnes grow from little girl into a young teenage woman right before my eyes. Then time stopped shortly when a plague swept through the village. It was awful. Almost half of the villagers succumbed to a sickness, including one of my dearest friends, Caroline. Agnes was devastated by the loss of now both her parents. She nor I ever got sick, as the plague seemed to brutally choose its victims randomly. That's sad. Too sad to remain in her childhood home, Agnes moved in with me. Over the years, I continued to watch her become a grown woman. Eventually, she married and had children of her own. We remained close friends. One day, while out foraging flowers and berries, she looked at me and laughed. I asked what was so funny, and she said, I've known you my whole life, and you haven't aged or changed not one bit in all this time. Maybe you're some kind of a goddess that fell from the heavens. I laughed at her flattery and said, that is nonsense. Of course I've aged. Everyone ages, and at that time, that is what I believed. Though I did like the idea of being a goddess, I laughed. Still, the question remained in my mind from that moment on. Each day I looked around at all of the people I've known in the village, and it did strike me as odd that all of them appeared to have aged faster than I. I've watched kids grow into adults, and adults not much older than me grow old and perish. At first, I figured that I was just aging well and was grateful for that. But as more time passed and I watched my beautiful little Agnes grow from a child into a fair lady and now a frail elderly woman, her husband had passed some years earlier, and her children had their own children. All too soon, I found myself by her side as she laid in bed awaiting her final breaths. She asked me how it is that she grew so old, and yet I remained the same. With tears in my eyes, I replied, "If the gods would allow, I'd give you this strange youth that I possess. It doesn't seem fair that I should remain." She smiled and said, "No, it's good that you are here, but do you still wonder where you came from?" I said, "More now than ever." Once more she demanded in her stern little voice, "Then go find out. You deserve to know, and maybe then you can tell me all about it in our next life." I said, "I promise you I will." I lost my dearest friend that night, and the hole in my heart remains still to this day. But I kept my words, and in the following days, I prepared to go out into the world and search for answers to so many questions. I had no idea where to even start, but what I did know for certain is that it seemed I had all the time in the world for those answers. Okay. My search took me to the farthest reaches of the world. I traveled on ships across the seas. I've seen so many wonders of the world and almost just as many terrors. I've been in company of the greatest men and women in our history and some of the worst. I've seen cities rise and fall in such a short time. I've seen hope shattered, and I've seen the hopeless rise in victories. I've even got married once. That was until my husband realized that I wasn't aging quite as fast as he and deemed me to be a witch or a demon. I barely escaped being burnt at the stake, though I did endure some rather uncomfortable torture. I decided not to try that marriage thing again. Oh, and speaking of which, I think it is probably clear by now that I am some sort of an immortal. So I like to clear things up. Of course, for as long as they have had TVs, I've watched all the movies and series about immortals. I've even read the books. Despite popular belief in pulp fiction, if I get injured or hurt, it hurts me, and I don't just heal up in moments. In fact, I'm not sure that if I got a fatal injury, it wouldn't kill me. So I've never put it to the test, and I don't intend to. However, I have learned to love adventure and pushing the limits of danger. So you might say I do tend to test myself just a little bit. Now about your Bigfoot, or Bretou, Bretou, the French word for Bigfoot, the Bretou. In 1798, I traveled through the French Alps with a small group of 27 explorers, surveyors, scholars, and one gold prospector, two members of the Imperial Guard, secretly sequestered from Napoleon's own army to ensure the safety of his discoveries, such as land, gold, and other minerals, and possibly something a bit more sinister. I had previously joined a few of the other explorers on a couple of occasions and was fortunate enough to have been there at the time to join them and go along for this journey. We traveled for days comfortably on the backs of pack mules. It didn't get exciting until we pushed deeper into the forest near the base of the mountain. We started to see signs that maybe we weren't traveling alone. In the light of day, things seemed fine, other than some random noises in the woods. It was the nights that brought danger. The people became uneasy when large rocks and sticks rained down into the camp throughout the night, sometimes hitting our tents and occasionally one of us. Some of the group thought it might be just natives or other prospectors trying to chase us out, but didn't know how they could throw these large, heavy items. We had to light fires at each corner of the camp every night, and the men took turns standing guard with torches. These events became a nightly thing and grew more dangerous as we traveled further into the mountains. This went on for weeks, and then it got worse. Somehow, during the night, someone or something started sneaking into the camp to steal and break the surveying equipment, even occasionally taking a mule. We knew when something had entered the camp by the awful smell it left behind. On what would become the final night before heading back for safety, one of the men let out a strange, bone-chilling scream as two powder gun shots rang out. Several of us ran out of our tents to see what was happening. The Imperial Guardsmen and a couple of others had cornered one of these invaders. It stood 8 to 9 foot tall and was covered in hair from head to toe. What I was assuming to be a male was extremely angry. The guards had guns with sharp bayonets. The others had flaming sticks from the fire. Together they was forcing him into a corner. To my surprise, the loud screams was coming from the half-man looking beast. One of the guardsmen got a little too close and it reached out and grabbed him. As he pulled the man in, the blade of his bayonet pierced into it, causing another ear-piercing scream and making him even angrier as he flung the soldier into one of the other men, sending both of them tumbling across the camp like rag dolls, leaving only 2 men to hold the beast at bay. Realizing the obvious danger, they backed off a bit, giving it just enough room to bolt past them and back into the forest. Ooh. With one of the soldiers badly injured, the encounter was enough to call off the trip. At that first light, we packed up and started our journey back without incident. I don't know if these creatures let us alone out of fear of us or simply because we had retreated. Either way, I'd seen enough of them to want to know more. I returned with the group and we all went our separate ways. I wonder still if those men actually ever told Napoleon what had really taken place out there and if he ever made a second attempt. Realizing from that trip there is still so much more to see and learn about in this world, I had a new adventure to follow. So I put together a small group of trusted adventurers and we together set out to search and discover several groups of what you call clansmen from all around the world. We found them to be just like people. We encountered all types, friendly, mean, bashful, and even frisky, if you know what I mean. But never had I ever encountered a hybrid that I am aware of. Oh, and no, I never slept with any of them either. Not for lack of a couple of them making attempts and finding out I am not such easy prey. Though through the years our group had been threatened and even attacked on a couple of occasions, we had also been welcomed in and shared the honor of engaging in activities with them, such as hunting and even ceremonial dancing on one occasion. You'd be surprised at how graceful these large creatures can be. But over the years, people started pushing them into hiding. They began to feel threatened by us and even their native friends. As they grew more recluse, I decided to stop looking and allow them their peace, only watching from afar when I thought they might be threatened. Back to Claire and Eva. To Claire, hello, you wonderful, beautiful miracle. I'm a bit surprised I haven't encountered you and your amazing mother through our travels, as it seems we have crossed some of the same paths. I've traveled all through Great Alaska, not limited to Prince of Wales Island. In fact, I spent an entire summer living in an offshore house near the island. It was very interesting and yet very relaxing. I'm aware of the 2 groups that live on the island. There is one we stayed very clear of. If I'm not mistaken, that was probably where Anna and Tommy were likely being kept. The other group was more approachable in the earlier years before you were born and before the loggers came through and pushed them into hiding. So I never had the honor of seeing or meeting Amarek's son. I'd like to offer my condolences to his mother. Claire, I'd love to know more about you and even possibly meet, only if you would like and on your terms. I understand you're no longer in the USA and that's okay because Europe is my old stopping ground. Just name a time and a place, and I'm sure you, your mother, and I have a lot of sharing with each other to do. Oh, and just so you know, I could share some very interesting leads on your cryptid quests. Trust me, you'll never find a better guide. Please consider. To Eva, wow, what an amazing and wonderful family you have. I guarantee I would recognize your beautiful face the moment I laid eyes on you, as I've been around a while and I've never forgotten a beautiful face. I've also spent a lot of time in Italy. In fact, I found some of the closest leads to where I originated from. Nothing solid yet, but I'm getting closer with every century that passed. As you put it, laugh out loud, LOL. Okay, every century. Yeah. Wow. All right. If you would ever like to meet and talk, I'd be willing to travel there or your Russian homeland, whichever you so choose, and please feel free to invite your brother. Did you mention whether or not he was married? Just asking. Is that a flirt? I spent some time in Russia during the Cold War era, for other reasons. So I don't believe I've ever come across your grandfather or his tribe. I'd be honored to meet him as well, if he would like. Either way, if you get this message, just let me know. Well, I think I've carried on long enough, and I believe I will have gotten my message through. Steve, I truly hope you continue to do what you are doing here, and I hope it brings you all the success and adventure you're in search of. We will meet someday. This I guarantee. Until then, never stop exploring. Yours truly, Raven. Um, I when I first read that, I'm like, never stop exploring. Why does that sound so familiar? I like that. I've always liked that. And then I remembered the my sign back there. Anyway, how amazing is that? Can you guys imagine that? So I mean, she's over 400, 500 years old. Can you imagine the life that and what that would be like? That's wild, Raven. Very cool story. Thank you for sharing that with us. I think everybody's going to really enjoy that. There's some tough parts in there, a tough part, but great story, and we just really appreciate it, and would love to hear more. I mean, if you're really that old, you've got a lot of stories to share, so we'd love to hear more. And out to you, Wendy, Claire, Eva, any of you that want to meet her somehow, let me know, and I'll see what I can do to try to set that up. You guys, I mean, Wendy, I know you know how to. This might be a little different though. I mean, this is somebody that's probably learned to hide even better than you over time. So, um, very cool stuff, very interesting, and a lot of fun. I hope we got a lot more stories like this to come, and we'll just keep on going. If you guys have a story you want to share, don't forget to send it in. I'll put it down below the address so you can send it in. And thank you so much for joining me. Look forward to that podcast and our podcast, our TAS podcast coming up as things get going. I think I got this all together here. I still have a few things I'm working on, but for the most part, I think we're ready to rock and roll. So let's get started with that. I appreciate it, and I will see you again real soon.